Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week. This week we've got 11 decks we're talking about here. We're starting with a bonus deck, which is going to be the Doom 2099 deck. It's running a 58% win rate at 0.68 cube rate, very high, but it is running only 170 games played in post-infinite top 50% according to Untapped. It doesn't make our top 10 just because we don't have the sample size, but it's actually doing very well, all things considered, given the sample size that it does have. It actually is a very unique deck in the sense that it is still running the Legion and the War Machine kind of line, and I actually was running something similar to this. However, I actually cut the Ebony Maw in my deck. However, this one is using Ebony Maw and tends to have a higher win rate. And so the key winner here, of course, is going to be Super Scroll as well. Super Scroll was something I identified in my review of 2099 being an absolutely incredible card given the state of the meta. Now, I imagine that the best deck for Doom 2099 this weekend, given that the weekend missions are going to feature it, is going to be one featuring Super Scroll. However, after this week, when 2099 is no longer in the weekend missions, it's very unlikely that Super Scroll is going to be in the top performing list, simply because the mirror matches are going to be much less frequent. So do bear that in mind if you're going to be playing this deck over an extended period of time. You'll likely see some adaptation with it, removing the Super Scroll and adding something else instead. Regardless, as a bonus deck, this is going to be one of the absolute top decks you can play, especially if you're looking to get those weekend missions done. Coming in at number 10, we do have Negative Gore, and it's running a 54% win rate and a uncharacteristically high cube rate at 0.35. Mr. Negative, at its best, often has relatively high win rates, but its cube rate often suffers from the fact that people will just retreat after a snap from Mr. Negative. And very few people will stay 8 cubes or 4 cubes against a Mr. Negative that has played Jane Foster and everything else in their combo. You kind of know what's coming. It's very hard to combat a Mr. Negative on turn 6 or 7. And the result is honestly a good deck that's performing well. Now, this has been one of those situations where Gore as a whole has been performing well, and this is currently the top performing Gore shell that obviously utilizes negative and everything else, and it obviously has Mystique as well, which hits the Iron Man. You've got a lot of options here. Super Scroll making this list too. It's a good deck. It's just a good deck. It's a bit of a one-trick pony with the way that you want to get negative out on turn 3, play the Lady Jane on turn 5, and then actually just pound your opponent mercilessly with all the zero costs that you pull ultimately. But still a very good deck. In my testing with it, a line that I absolutely loved was Sage into the Taskmaster or the Gore into the Taskmaster. It actually does surprise me that the Gore Agent Venom decks aren't overperforming against this one, although we do have some Agent Venom decks coming as well. But I do like this deck a lot. It's definitely a good one. Top performer for Mr. Negative. Going to number 9 here, we do have Cannon Clog, and Cannon Clog is going to be, we have 2 Clog decks on the top 10 this week. This is utilizing Cannonball. This is a much more traditional style of Cannonball Clog. I mean, it pretty much is the one that you've been seeing for the last several months. Titania, Green Goblin. If you see Titania come down, you know what's coming next, right? It's pretty much the key spot that Titania is being played. We're seeing a lot of the 1/5 stat line cards being played. Like you're better be ready for a whole bunch of Hydration Robert, because there's a ton of Hydration Robert in this top 10. So this is your classic Clog. It's actually performing really good right now because of Doom 2099. So if you're someone that does not have Doom 2099 and you want to ruin everybody that is playing Doom 2099 in the weekend missions, you play some version of Clog and you absolutely pump them. That's essentially what you do. So this one's running a 56% win rate, a cube rate that's a little lower than expected, but I think the cube rate will actually inch higher, given that the weekend mission is going to be 2099, and this is an excellent counter to that just because they clog themselves, you clog them, and with the debris, the Vipers, and everything else, and obviously the Titanias and the Green Goblins, they just run out of space, and then your Cannonball single-handedly wins a lane. So really cool. Like this deck a lot, especially in the current meta environment. Going to number 8. It was the top deck from last week. It has slipped down, which is that kind of happens here and there. Because what happens is you have a deck that's performing exceptionally well. The play rate is somewhat low. And then, we feature it, other people feature it, other people talk about it. It gets mass adoption. And while the stats are still very good, the win rate kind of comes down because people start to play it more and people get used to it. They learn to counter it, etc. And that's kind of what happened here. But a 56% win rate at 0.32 cube rate, that is the baseline of what a good deck is, right? Over 55% win rate, over 0.3 cubes, that's what we talk about. And so this package is just solid. I actually, in testings, I've been playing a lot of this, to be honest with you. Moon Knight is a great accompaniment to Fenris Wolf because you often hit 6 drops in their hands. Gambit doesn't tend to provide as much value as the Moon Knight because with Gambit, you could destroy something, but unless you're playing Gambit on turn 6 and you're trying to destroy something large that they play, and then Fenris, but then, you don't know what you're hitting, but you might hit something, of value on turn 3 or 4, which is still good for Fenris. But Moon Knight tends to reach a little higher, which I kind of do like. But at the end of the day, it's a discard deck. It's a good discard deck, and it's been performing pretty solid. So if you're a discard fan like I am, this is one you can turn to. It is definitely a good deck, and it comes in at number 8 on this week's list. Coming in at number 7, we've got Galactaling. Now, this was a very good deck from last week as well. It was the first week that we featured it. 56% win rate, 0.43 cube rate, so an exceptional cube rate, honestly. This is the first deck featuring Hydration Robert. He's going to come back again, which is kind of crazy, but you do have Kitty Pryde, Zabu, Hydration Robert, so a very strong curve early on. Galacta with Captain Marvel, who I have absolutely loved, and I've continued to test this deck a lot, and because of the number of 1-drops and the 2-drop, especially in the case of Kate Bishop, which helps you curve into 3 as well, Wiccan's been a fun addition to this deck too, and I find myself actually hitting the Wiccan. I still think the superstars of this deck, though, are Galacta, either on turn 3, which is a snap condition easy with Zabu, or of course with Psylocke. Galacta into Cap Marvel is incredible. Captain Marvel single-handedly wins games. Galacta into Iron Man, also fantastic. Galacta into anything, I think, is proving to be incredible. And I think that this is a season pass card that's going to age incredibly well. It feels like it's not quite good enough to get nerfed. Don't get me wrong, it could get nerfed. It is definitely good enough to deserve or warrant a potential nerf. However, it's not like egregious the way some other season pass cards have been in the past, right? It comes just under, like, where it's like, are they going to nerf it? Like, they could get away with not nerfing it, but also it's probably the best card in the game, you know what I mean? So Galacta into Cap Marvel, insane. Galacta into Iron Man, insane. Wiccan into pretty much everything else, fantastic. And Emperor Hulkling, honestly, in my playtest with this deck over the past week, is a little bit of cope, but also kind of fun. So anyways, there's that. Really cool deck. I like it a lot. I'm glad to see a Emperor Hulkling deck doing as well as it is at number 7. And that is going to take us to number 6, which is going to be Toxic Ajax. Now, Toxic Ajax has been a constant meta presence, and I gotta give credit to those that were the Ajax believers. This has been a card that has continued to impress over the last month or two. At first glance, Ajax was so heavily countered by everyone playing Luke Cage, and then now they just run Luke Cage themselves and they just win games with very modest but incredibly high-powered Ajax plays and just disruptive plays everywhere else. Malekith now making these decks. The Valentina Luke Cage stuff is pretty fantastic, and Red Guardian, a very important tech piece that hasn't been necessarily there prior. Red Guardian, exceptional against Doombots, Doom 2099s, sorry, exceptional against other Luke Cages, exceptional in the upcoming meta with Bruce Banner too. So if you're watching this video and Bruce Banner has already come out and you're waiting for the next decks of the week, use Red Guardian. Red Guardian's going to be an incredible choice there. So anyways, Red Guardian, excellent in this deck. This deck as a whole has been really good. 57% win rate, 0.44 cube rate, well above expectations. Toxic Ajax continues to be an excellent choice in the meta. And then we go to number 5, which is going to be a 58% win rate, bounce and move deck at a 0.38 cube rate. So 58% win rate, very solid. And this is very similar to, it's kind of like a new rendition of Little Movers. Frigga now making these decks. And it's funny because Frigga was originally in some of these shells in an experimental fashion when it first came out, but it didn't quite make the best versions of the deck. And now that it got buffed to a 3/4, suddenly it's like that extra 1 power, it just kind of turned it on a little more. It gave it that little extra that it needed to have a greater impact. Now this deck is pretty solid. It runs Toxic and Beast as your bounce. I love the splash of US Agent, by the way. That was a surprise to me, and it's actually a flavor that has been included this week that has not been there in the past. And verifying across a couple different lists, the US Agent version of it right now is outperforming. Why is that? Well, just think about it. The Doom bots are so popular right now, so you have Doom 2099 generating all these Doom bots, and US Agent says thank you very much, right? You got the Doom bots coming, you got Dr. Doom himself, so a lot of things that US Agent can munch on. So honestly, solid deck, absolutely incredible right now. A great counterpiece to the current meta. Might be a little difficult to play, admittedly, but a fun one nonetheless. And if you want to test yourself, you can play this one here. Going to number 4, can you believe it? Asgardians. It's Asgardians, a 58% win rate, and it's running a 0.63 cube rate, which is remarkable. Now the game sample size is a little on the low end, so it's a little over. It's like 260 games, I think it was, which is a little lower than I usually like to cover. However, It's performing exceptionally well. We got a Moon Girl Beta Ray Bill Thor deck, which I mean, I'm never going to complain about. You got the She-Hulk in there, which is one of my absolute favorite cards in the game that I'm always looking for a reason to play. And you damn well know I'm going to play it next week when Bruce Banner comes out. It's just a good list. It's just a cool list. And in my experimentation with it, I'm like, huh, King Utri kind of isn't that bad here. What's fascinating about this deck is it does not run Jane Foster. That is the thing that really stood out to me. It does not run Jane Foster. It relies more on King Eitri and on the Moon Girl. And so that's kind of a bit of an interesting take here. Hydration Robert makes this deck as well. I was testing it. I was like kind of impressed with how well it was doing. I think I prefer Jane Foster. Like I want to prefer Jane Foster, but the stats don't lie. This is performing exceptionally well. And so if you want to give it a shot, now's the time. Now's the time before it catches on. It's quite a spicy brew. I like it a lot. Going into our top three, we have Agent Havoc. This was a very interesting deck that started to propagate against the meta here. And listen, I think Agent Venom's still one of the best cards in the game, despite the changes that they made. I think that Cassandra Nova, Sage are very, very good cards in the meta. Now, Cassandra Nova has not felt as good. Erisham has been less prevalent. And so Cassandra Nova is starting to feel more cuttable at times, like in my testing of the decks. However, still, Agent Venom's great here. Athena's great. Havoc, ironically, fantastic here because like there's not a lot of expensive cards. Like there really isn't. You're generating a lot of value at inexpensive costs. And so even if you end up at 4 energy or 5 or whatever, and you play that Havoc kind of later, it's still okay, right? So I do like this a lot. Kitty Pryde able to like effectively help you curve if you have an odd energy that you're using with Havoc, because again, you can do Havoc on turn 4 with your Kitty Pryde, play something like a Sage or Cosmo into Kitty Pryde, right? And so you can kind of utilize the energies that you have available effectively, and Kitty's great at that. But honestly, you get a lot of reach from Athena. It's a good deck. It's just a good deck, and it's impressive what it's doing at a 59% win rate. Now, the cube rate's low. 0.25 is on the lower end, but it might be some piloting challenge here because I think it's a very new breed of deck. So I think that I could see the win rate coming down and the cube rate going up as more people try it. But anyways, coming in at number 3, I think it's a very fascinating deck. Number 2, this is the highest performing version of Clog, and it's kind of similar to what you had before. But this one is, it just has the Kitty Pryde, has the Athena, so you have a little more vertical power. You got the Hawkeye, Red Guardian crushing in these decks. Again, Doom 2099, very popular card. It's just a good deck. This is the top performing version of Clog right now, and it doesn't surprise me because Clog is a perfect counter to what we're seeing in the meta right now. So the old version that we just talked about prior, still doing good. This was running a 62% win rate and a 0.29 cube rate, which is funny because it's actually technically the highest win rate version of any deck we have this week, but I decided not to make it number 1 because the cube rate on the other one is just so much better for a slightly lower winner. I flipped it. I don't usually do that because I just want to go straight by the stats. I want to remove my influence from the top 10, you know what I mean? And this week I just couldn't help myself. I'm like, you know what? No, the cube rate is too much better for the number 1 deck. We got to keep it there. So anyways, that's Clog. Makes perfect sense as why it's doing so well. Let's move to the number 1 deck, and as we do so, a reminder, guys, it is almost 2025, and we are like 400 subscriptions away to 100,000 subscribers. And I want you to say thank you, okay? If you've not subscribed yet, I would appreciate if you consider it. But those that have subscribed, the 99,000 plus subscribers, thank you so much. We just might make it in 2024. What a great way to bring in the new year. Thank you for your support. It means the world to me, and I hope that you absolutely crush it with the number 1 deck of this week, which is Galactus Summers. A 60% win rate deck. Imagine it was a 20% win rate deck. That would have been awesome. But a 0.64 cube rate. Absolutely remarkable cube rate. It does not surprise me that Galactus is at the heart of this deck here. Hydration Robert making the number 1 deck of the week here. Hope Summers, Juggernaut is a surprise play. You got the Copycat surprise play. You got the Mysterio into the Sasquatch play. Remember, Mysterio's going to proc the Hope Summers too. Galacta. There's so much happening in this deck. You got the tech of Shadow King. Now, when I was playing this deck, I was like, damn, this deck's actually good. I almost wanted to sneak Athena into it. Honestly, I really wanted to sneak Athena into it. But Athena, there's some synergies that work with Athena, some without it. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just cook. Let's just cook with this deck. It's a really interesting one. And you know what? Honestly, it is so fun to play. It's a bit tricky first couple of rounds. You got to get used to kind of playing it again here, but it's a good one. It's a fantastic deck. And so if you're looking to try something new, this is the top performing deck according to Untapped base statistics, top 50% the last 7 days. Galactus Summers, 60% win rate, 0.64 cube rate. And we'll see you in the next rendition of the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week.